Ethan stood in front of the tall glass doors of the luxury store, adjusting his jacket and straightening his shirt. The morning sunlight reflected off the polished windows, making the gold lettering of the store's name shimmer. Inside, the store looked pristine, every display carefully arranged, each item gleaming under the soft lights. It was the kind of place that made people feel both impressed and intimidated. Ethan took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was here. Today, he was undercover, evaluating how the store treated different customers. This wasn't just a routine assignment. It was a mission to see if prejudice could hide behind expensive suits and sparkling jewelry he had prepared for days. Picking out an outfit that would allow him to blend in without drawing unnecessary attention. Ethan didn't want the staff to notice anything unusual about him at first glance. He wanted to observe naturally, to see genuine reactions. As he pushed open the door, a gentle chime announced his entrance. The subtle sound made him more alert, more aware of every movement inside the store. The interior smelled faintly of expensive leather and cologne. Soft classical music floated through the air, mingling with the quiet murmur of conversation. Staff members dressed in perfectly tailored uniforms moved gracefully, attending to the few early shoppers who were already browsing. Ethan noted how each employee smiled or nodded politely at customers, some greeting with warmth, others more mechanically. He started near a display of designer watches, pretending to study the details. He examined the craftsmanship carefully, turning the watches slightly in his hands without actually picking one up. It was important that he seemed genuinely interested, so any reactions from the staff would be natural. As he looked around, he noticed a middle-aged man behind the counter, clearly the store owner. His posture was confident, bordering on haughty, and his eyes scanned the room like a predator assessing prey. There was a subtle tension in his gaze that made Ethan pause. Ethan moved slowly through the aisles, observing the subtle cues in the staff's behavior. Some employees glanced at him more than necessary, whispering quietly when they thought he wasn't looking. He noticed one assistant follow him slightly with her eyes, a faint frown as if trying to measure something about him. It was exactly the kind of behavior he was here to document, how the store treated someone who didn't fit their usual idea of a high-end sport. As he reached the central display of handbags, the store owner approached. Ethan had expected that he might eventually be addressed, but he hadn't anticipated the sharpness in the man's tone. "Can I help you find something?" the owner asked, his eyes narrowing slightly as they met Ethan's. There was a hint of suspicion. Almost as if the owner was judging Ethan before he had a chance to speak, Ethan kept his voice calm and friendly. "Just browsing, thank you. I like to see all the options before deciding." He held a relaxed posture, careful not to appear defensive or nervous. The owner's frown deepened. Ethan could sense the owner's unease, and he made a mental note of it. This subtle discomfort was part of what he needed to observe and record. A few minutes later, the owner returned with a more insistent approach. "I'm sorry, but we have a certain clientele. We like to make sure everyone fits in with our environment. Perhaps you should come back another time." His words were polite on the surface but carried a sharp edge. Ethan felt the sting immediately. This was not about customer service. This was about prejudice hiding behind politeness. Ethan nodded slowly, not raising his voice. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." He stepped back, giving space and maintaining composure. It was important to stay calm, even as he felt the unfairness of the situation. Every detail, every tone, every glance mattered for his report as he turned to leave. Ethan noticed the staff watching him carefully. Some exchanged glances and a few tried to appear casual, but their body language revealed curiosity and slight tension. Ethan made a mental note of how the team reacted to both his presence and the owner's instructions. These observations were crucial. This wasn't just a story about prejudice. It was about how the entire environment responded to it. Outside, Ethan paused for a moment to breathe. The air felt different after stepping out of the controlled, polished space of the store. He knew he had seen enough for his first visit. The owner had revealed his bias without realizing it, and Ethan had observed carefully without letting frustration take over. That was the essence of his mission: patience, observation, composure. He decided to take a short walk around the nearby streets, pretending to casually explore. He watched people passing by, noting expressions and interactions, practicing the same careful attention he had inside the store. This exercise helped him stay calm and focused, preparing for his next move. Returning later that afternoon, Ethan reflected on the subtle power dynamics he had witnessed. The store was beautiful, the products exquisite, but the atmosphere carried an invisible barrier. It wasn't just about luxury. It was about who felt welcome and who didn't. He understood that biases often hid behind polite words, behind soft smiles, behind carefully chosen language. It was a lesson in human behavior as much as it was about the store itself. Back at his apartment, Ethan carefully recorded every detail in his notebook. He described the way the owner's eyes had shifted, the subtle stiffening of the staff, the whispered comments, and the polite but cutting remark that had asked him to leave. Every observation, no matter how small, mattered. These details would build the larger picture, showing a pattern of behavior that wasn't visible to casual shoppers. He also reflected on his own responses. Staying calm and polite, maintaining composure even in the face of unfair treatment, was not just professional, it was personal discipline. It was a reminder that sometimes influence and understanding came not from confrontation, but from silent observation and measured reactions. The evening sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets. Ethan looked out of his window, thinking about the next steps. Tomorrow, he would return, possibly in a slightly different disguise, to continue his investigation. The goal was not to provoke, but to document, to reveal patterns without creating conflict. His focus was clear: accuracy, integrity, and patience. As he prepared for bed, Ethan reflected on the day's events. The store had revealed much more than just luxury merchandise. It had revealed attitudes, assumptions, and biases that were often invisible to those who were comfortable in such spaces. Observing and recording these truths was his responsibility. He understood that real change, or accountability, began with careful documentation and the quiet strength of patience. The night outside was calm. Streetlights flickered on one by one, and distant traffic hummed softly. Ethan lay down, feeling a mixture of anticipation and focus. Tomorrow would bring more observation, more insight, and more evidence of the patterns he had begun to uncover. He felt confident in his approach, calm, professional, committed to the truth. With that, he closed his eyes, letting the quiet settle around him. The mission was just beginning, and Ethan knew that careful attention, a steady mind, and unshakable composure would guide him through the challenges ahead. The next morning, Ethan woke early, the city streets still quiet under the soft light of dawn. He prepared for another visit to the luxury store, making sure his outfit was different from yesterday but still fitting for the environment. Today, he wanted to see if the owner and staff treated him differently, if their prejudice would reveal itself again, or if any lessons from yesterday had lingered. He reminded himself to remain calm, patient, and observant. Every gesture, glance, and word mattered, and he intended to notice them all. Walking to the store, Ethan noticed the changing rhythm of the city. Delivery trucks rumbled by, early shoppers stepped briskly along the sidewalks, and the occasional taxi horn sounded. He kept his eyes alert, but his movements relaxed, blending naturally with the morning crowd. His mind went over the plan for the day. Enter the store as a different customer persona. Interact minimally at first, then carefully observe responses. When he reached the glass doors, the familiar chime announced his arrival. Ethan paused for a moment, taking in the interior. The staff looked busier than yesterday, attending to a small group of customers. The store owner was at the center, his sharp eyes moving across the room, assessing his surroundings. Ethan noticed immediately that the owner's demeanor had not changed, still confident. Still haughty, still commanding the space with authority, Ethan moved through the aisles slowly, pretending to examine the merchandise, allowing his eyes to follow the details of jewelry, handbags, and shoes. He noted the way some staff members glanced at him, spring quietly among themselves, and how the owner's gaze occasionally flicked toward him. There was subtle tension in the air, a reaction to his presence that seemed almost instinctive. He observed it all with careful neutrality, documenting mental notes of tone, body language, and facial expressions. After a few minutes, the owner approached. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice polite but sharp, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at Ethan. The tone carried. "Just looking," Ethan replied, his voice calm and even. "I enjoy seeing the craftsmanship in person." He held his body relaxed, intentionally non-confrontational. The owner's frown deepened, and he shifted slightly, almost as if he were trying to assert control over the situation. "We like to ensure that our customers are serious and fit the environment," he said. "Perhaps this isn't the right place for you." The words were measured, courteous on the surface, but the edge of bias was unmistakable. Ethan felt the weight of exclusion but did not react emotionally. Instead, he smiled politely. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." Then he continued to browse, moving slowly along the displays, observing how the staff reacted to both him and the owner's instructions. Some assistants looked uneasy, while others pretended not to notice. Every detail was relevant. Every subtle cue a part of the larger picture he was compiling. Ethan paused near a display of handbags and watches. Pretending to admire a delicate piece, he noted how the owner's gaze lingered, almost as if measuring him. The owner's body language was stiff, controlled, and deliberate. Ethan sensed an underlying discomfort in the room, a subtle tension that revealed much more than words could. It was clear the luxury environment was comfortable only for those the owner considered acceptable, and Ethan's presence disrupted that equilibrium as he continued. Ethan overheard snippets of staff conversation. Whispered comments, careful glances, and averted eyes told a story of internal conflict. Employees were aware of the owner's bias, yet some were unsure how to navigate it. Ethan recognized the significance of these observations. The staff's reactions were as telling as the owner's words. They revealed the culture of the store, the influence of authority, and the impact of prejudice. After a while, Ethan made a move to leave. As he walked toward the exit, the owner stepped in front of him. "I'm afraid you need to leave," he said firmly, his tone sharper than before. There was no room for negotiation. Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand. Thank you for your time." Outside, Ethan paused to gather his thoughts. The morning visit had confirmed what he had suspected. The owner's attitude was consistent, and the subtle biases of the staff reinforced the exclusivity of the environment. Ethan understood that this was not about merchandise or sales. It was about perception, power, and social hierarchy. He walked along the sidewalk, blending with morning pedestrians. Each step allowed him to process the observations, to prepare for the next visit. His mission was not to provoke anger or create confrontation. It was to document reality as it unfolded, to reveal patterns in behavior that often went unnoticed. Later, Ethan returned home to review his notes. He detailed every aspect of the store, from the owner's facial expressions to the staff's subtle reactions. He reflected on the importance of composure in the face of bias. Staying calm, professional, and patient allowed him to observe without interference, to maintain control over his experience while the owner's prejudice became apparent on its own. That evening, Ethan considered the larger implications. Prejudice often hides behind politeness, behind luxury, and behind the illusion of civility. His observations were proof that biases could manifest subtly yet consistently. Documenting these moments with accuracy and integrity was crucial. The story was not just about one man's attitude, but about an entire system that reinforced exclusion through unspoken rules and social norms. Ethan prepared for the next day, knowing he would return once more, perhaps with a slightly different approach to continue his documentation. His goal was to gather enough evidence to demonstrate the patterns without confrontation, to show that the store's outward appearance of sophistication masked a deeper, less visible prejudice. As night fell, the city lights reflected off the windows, casting a glow over the quiet streets. Ethan lay in bed, reviewing the day in his mind, feeling a mix of anticipation and focus. Tomorrow would bring new insights, new observations, and perhaps new reactions from the owner and staff. He remained committed to his principles: patience, integrity, and careful observation. With a deep breath, Ethan allowed himself to relax. The mission was ongoing, and each visit, each interaction, brought him closer to understanding the subtle realities hidden behind luxury, politeness, and appearance. He drifted into sleep, calm and steady, ready for the challenges the next day would bring. The following morning, Ethan woke early again, feeling a mix of anticipation and resolve. He knew today would be another important step in his quiet investigation of the luxury store and its staff. Yesterday had confirmed the owner's prejudice and the subtle tension among the employees, but today he wanted to see if the patterns persisted and if there was any change in behavior. He prepared carefully, selecting a different outfit, one that conveyed professionalism and casual sophistication at the same time. Every detail mattered, from shoes to accessories, in order to blend naturally while still observing keenly, walking through the city streets. Ethan noticed the subtle shifts in light and energy of the morning. The air was cooler, carrying the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, mingled with the faint smell of car exhaust. Delivery vans rumbled down side streets, while early commuters moved quickly along the sidewalks. He kept his movements calm, his gaze attentive, and his mind alert, observing people as he went. Each passerby offered subtle clues about human behavior, responses to surroundings. In the unspoken rhythm of the city, as Ethan approached the luxury store, he took a deep breath. Preparing himself for the same environment that had yesterday seemed so rigid and exclusive. The store was already open, lights bright and polished, neatly arranged displays that seemed almost too perfect, like a carefully curated scene. Staff members were attending to customers, their movements precise and controlled, while the owner stood near the center, observing everything with a sharp, measuring gaze. Ethan stepped inside, allowing the soft chime of the door to announce his presence. Immediately, he noticed the subtle reactions, a quick glance from a staff member, a small nod of acknowledgement from another, and the owner's piercing eyes following him as he moved through the aisles. He walked slowly, pretending to examine a collection of watches, touching them lightly and inspecting the details as if considering a purchase. Every motion was deliberate, giving him time to observe and note the behaviors around him. The owner approached swiftly, his face composed but with a faint tightening of the jaw. "Good morning," he said, voice polite but carrying an edge of scrutiny. "Can I help you find something?" His words sounded courteous, yet the underlying tension was unmistakable. Ethan smiled politely. "Just browsing, thank you. I like to see the craftsmanship up close." He kept his tone neutral, calm, and unprovocative. Letting the owner's reaction reveal itself naturally, the owner's gaze lingered a little longer than usual, scanning Ethan from head to toe, as if searching for some sign that he did not belong. Ethan felt the subtle weight of judgment but did not respond defensively. Instead, he observed, noting the way the owner's body shifted. The slight narrowing of his eyes, the faint furrow of his brow, these were small gestures, but they spoke volumes about perception, authority, and biased staff members nearby moved carefully, some pretending to attend to other customers. While others tried to avoid direct interaction with Ethan, the tension in the room was almost palpable, like a low hum vibrating through the air. Ethan understood that this was the invisible barrier of exclusion, a social boundary reinforced by the owner's assumptions and the employee's cautious compliance. He continued through the store, pausing at a display of handbags. He picked one up with interest, turning it gently in his hands, and examined the stitching and texture closely. One of the assistants, a young woman with attentive eyes, approached hesitantly. "Would you like to see this in a different color?" She asked softly, her voice careful, almost tentative. Ethan nodded, keeping his expression friendly. "That would be wonderful. Thank you." He noted her subtle discomfort, the way she seemed torn between following instructions and exercising her own judgment. Every interaction was a learning moment, revealing the layers of complexity beneath what seemed like simple customer service. The owner watched from across the room, arms crossed, expression tight. He stepped closer, intercepting Ethan as he moved toward another display. "I'm afraid we can't have customers wandering too freely," he said firmly. "It's a private environment for serious shoppers." The words were courteous on the surface, but they carried the unmistakable undertone of exclusion. Ethan responded politely, without anger or defensiveness. I understand. Thank you for letting me know. He adjusted his pace slightly, moving in the direction the owner indicated, all the while observing how the staff reacted. Some hesitated, glancing between Ethan and the owner, unsure of how to behave. Others kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact entirely. The room was a living study of human behavior. As he continued, Ethan overheard snippets of conversation among staff members. One whispered, "He doesn't seem like the usual customer." Another replied softly, "Just follow the rules. The boss has strong opinions." Fragments confirmed Ethan's observations. The owner's bias influenced not only who was allowed into the store, but how employees responded to anyone considered outside the preferred social circle. Ethan walked to the exit, allowing the chime to sound again. The owner approached, his posture firm, a final assertion of control. "I think it's best if you leave," he said. There was no negotiation, only polite insistence. Ethan nodded slowly. "Of course. Thank you for your time." He stepped out, breathing in the cool morning air, letting himself decompress from the tension outside. Ethan paused on the sidewalk, processing everything he had observed. The morning confirmed yesterday's lessons. Prejudice was consistent, subtle, and reinforced by social hierarchy. The staff's reactions, the owner's control, and the environment itself created an invisible barrier that was maintained daily. Ethan knew that documenting these patterns carefully, without confrontation, would reveal the truth more clearly than any argument could. He walked along the quiet streets, reflecting on patience and observation. Each visit, each interaction, was a piece of a larger picture, showing how bias operated in subtle ways and how authority could dictate behavior. He felt a quiet sense of purpose, knowing that careful documentation and steady composure could shine a light on these patterns without escalation or conflict. Returning home, Ethan reviewed his mental notes, writing down every detail, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, and the reactions of the staff. He considered the significance of each observation, understanding that true insight came not from surface appearances, but from careful, consistent attention to subtle cues. As evening approached, Ethan prepared mentally for the next day. He considered a slightly different approach, perhaps interacting with the staff in a small, polite way to gauge their individual attitudes apart from the owner's influence. Each visit was an opportunity to learn more, to collect evidence, and to understand the social dynamics at play. The city outside glimmered under the fading light. Reflecting the calm of the streets and the subtle movements of people returning home, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Patience, integrity, and observation had guided him thus far. Tomorrow would offer new challenges and new insights. He was ready, prepared to continue his careful study, knowing that the truth often revealed itself through consistent attention, calm presence, and quiet perseverance. Lying in bed, Ethan thought about the patterns he had witnessed, the behaviors shaped by authority and the invisible barriers created by prejudice. He drifted to sleep with a sense of calm focus, ready for the ongoing mission that would continue to reveal the hidden truths of the luxury store, its owner, and the subtle ways bias shaped every interaction. Ethan woke early the next morning with a quiet determination. The events of the previous day had given him clarity, but he knew today required careful observation. His plan was simple: enter the store, act as an ordinary customer, and watch closely how the staff and owner reacted. Every detail mattered, from the way he carried himself to the small interactions that revealed the underlying culture of the store. He chose a different outfit today, more casual yet polished, ensuring that it reflected confidence without drawing unnecessary attention. Shoes were cleaned, watch polished, and every small detail considered. Ethan understood that perception played a key role. His presence needed to blend into the environment while allowing him to see the subtle behaviors of others. As he walked through the streets, he noticed familiar sights, yet approached them with renewed awareness. The bakery emitted the same warm aroma of bread. The commuters moved briskly. Delivery trucks rumbled along side streets. Yet now, every movement and sound carried more meaning. A glance from a passerby, A smile exchanged, or a frown noticed all, became pieces of the puzzle he was trying to understand. Upon reaching the luxury store, Ethan paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The glass doors reflected a world of polished displays and bright lights. Staff members moved gracefully, attending to customers with precise gestures. The owner, standing near the center, radiated authority and scrutiny. Observing the room like a chess player planning each move, Ethan entered, allowing the soft chime of the door to signal his arrival. Almost immediately, subtle reactions emerged. A quick glance from a staff member, a slight nod, and the owner's gaze following him across the floor. He walked slowly, feigning interest in a display of watches, touching them lightly as if evaluating their craftsmanship. Each motion was deliberate, giving him time to observe the nuances of human behavior around him. The owner approached, greeting him with a polite yet guarded good morning. "Can I help you?" His voice was courteous, but the undertone of scrutiny was clear. "Just browsing," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. "I enjoy examining the details up close." His tone remained calm, neutral, and friendly. Allowing the owner's reaction to unfold naturally, the owner studied him, scanning from head to toe, searching for any indication that Ethan did not belong. Ethan noticed the tightening of the jaw, the faint furrow of the brow, the narrowing of the eye's small gestures, conveying judgment and bias. Instead of responding, he simply observed, recording each detail in his mind. Staff members nearby shifted subtly, some pretending to attend to other customers, others avoiding direct engagement. The air in the store carried a low, almost tangible tension, as if the unspoken rules of hierarchy and perception hovered invisibly around everyone. Ethan recognized this invisible barrier, understanding how the owner's biases influenced not just him, but the employees' behavior as well. He moved to a display of handbags, examining each piece carefully. One young assistant approached tentatively. "Would you like to see this in another color?" she asked softly, voice hesitant, as if caught between her own initiative and obedience to the owner's expectations. "That would be lovely." "Thank you," Ethan replied calmly. He noted her uncertainty, the way she struggled with the balance of compliance and personal judgment. Each interaction, no matter how small, revealed the dynamics that the store operated under, the invisible pressures shaping behavior. Across the room, the owner's eyes never left him. He stepped closer, arms crossed, his posture firm. "I'm afraid we can't have customers wandering too freely," he said, voice polite but firm. "This is a private environment for serious shoppers." His words carried the subtle weight of exclusion. "I understand." "Thank you for letting me know," Ethan replied politely, adjusting his path as directed. He continued to watch, noting how staff responded to his presence hesitation, lowered eyes, whispered exchanges. Every movement was telling. The environment was alive with social cues, hierarchy, subtle power dynamics. As he moved toward the exit, he overheard fragments of conversation among staff. "He's not like the usual customers," one whispered. Another responded softly, "Just follow the rules. The boss is particular about who enters." These small exchanges confirmed Ethan's observations. The owner's bias shaped not only access but the way employees carried out their duties. Ethan left the store quietly, stepping into the fresh morning air. He paused for a moment, processing everything he had seen. The patterns were consistent. Prejudice and authority intertwined to create invisible barriers that influence behavior. The staff's caution, the owner's control, and the overall atmosphere of the store painted a clear picture. Walking back through the streets, he reflected on patience and observation. Every visit offered a chance to collect insights, to witness the subtle ways in which authority and bias affected people's actions. Calm presence, careful attention, and restraint were his tools, allowing him to gather truth without confrontation. Back at his apartment, Ethan recorded every detail he could remember, the expressions, tones, gestures, and reactions. These notes were not mere observations. They were evidence of how assumptions and social hierarchy impacted real interactions. He understood that the story unfolded not in confrontations, but in subtleties, the unspoken rules that governed behavior. As evening fell, he prepared mentally for the next day. A new approach might be needed. Perhaps engaging with employees in small ways to observe their personal attitudes outside the owner's influence. Each visit was a step deeper into understanding, a layer peeled back to reveal the complex social dynamics at play. The city glowed under the fading light, streets quieting as people returned home. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling calm yet focused. Patience, integrity, and observation had guided him thus far. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more insights. Lying in bed, he thought about the patterns he had witnessed and the subtle barriers created by bias. Sleep came slowly, but his mind remained alert and centered. Ready for the continuing mission of careful observation, quiet reflection, and understanding the hidden truths of the luxury store and the human behaviors within it. Ethan awoke before sunrise, the quiet of the city seeping through his window. Today was a pivotal day in his subtle investigation of the luxury store. After observing the patterns of prejudice and tension in previous visits, he knew he had to pay even closer attention to small gestures, conversations, and reactions. Each detail might reveal the deeper dynamics that no outward display could easily show. He prepared carefully, selecting attire that conveyed both professionalism and casual confidence. Every aspect mattered. Shoes shined, shirt neat, and accessories minimal. Ethan understood that blending into the environment while remaining observant required thoughtfulness and care. His goal was to witness behavior without triggering defense or suspicion. Walking toward the store, Ethan noticed the city's rhythm. Delivery trucks rumbled down the streets, cyclists wove between traffic, and the smell of fresh pastries drifted from a bakery nearby. Even seemingly ordinary people offered insights into human behavior, the way someone held their phone, glanced at a passerby, or hurried along a sidewalk told a story of attention, priority, or instinctive bias. He observed silently, taking note of small, telling patterns. When he arrived at the store, he paused for a moment outside, observing the employees as they arranged displays and greeted early customers. Their movements were deliberate, efficient, and almost rehearsed. The owner stood nearby, posture rigid, scanning the space with a sharp, calculating eye. Ethan inhaled slowly, mentally preparing himself for the layered social environment he was about to enter. The chime of the door announced his entry, and immediately subtle reactions rippled through the room. A brief glance, a shift in stance, a frown quickly masked small human cues that revealed both perception and judgment. Ethan moved deliberately toward a display of watches, examining the craftsmanship as if he were a serious customer. Each gesture was precise, giving him space to observe how the staff and owner responded. The owner approached, his polite voice laced with an unmistakable edge of authority. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "Just browsing," Ethan replied with a calm smile. "I enjoy seeing the details of the craftsmanship." He kept his tone neutral, friendly, but unassuming. Allowing the owner's reaction to show itself naturally, the owner's eyes lingered, scanning Ethan for cues that might suggest he didn't belong. Subtle shifts in posture, furrows of the brow, and tightening of the jaw spoke volumes. Ethan simply noted each detail, his calm observation allowing the dynamics to unfold without provocation. Staff members responded in kind, some pretending to attend to other customers, some carefully avoiding interaction. The tension in the room was almost tangible, an invisible boundary set by the owner's assumptions. Ethan understood the dynamics perfectly. Bias was not always overt, but it influenced how everyone behaved in subtle, pervasive ways. Moving toward a handbag display, Ethan picked up a bag, examining its stitching and texture. A young assistant approached cautiously. "Would you like to see this in another color?" she asked softly, balancing initiative and deference to the owner's implied rules. "That would be wonderful." "Thank you," Ethan said politely. He watched her hesitation closely, recognizing the struggle between her judgment and following directives. Each interaction offered insight into the culture of the store, revealing the ways authority and bias influence daily behavior. The owner moved closer, his arms crossed. "I'm afraid customers cannot wander freely," he said, polite but firm. "We maintain a private environment for serious shoppers." Ethan responded calmly, adjusting his path as directed. He noted how staff members reacted, some uncertain, some visibly uncomfortable, enforcing the unspoken hierarchy at play, overhearing fragments of whispered conversations. Ethan learned more. "He's not like the usual customer," one employee said. Another added, "Just follow the rules. The boss is particular." Subtle exchanges confirmed his observations. The owner's bias affected not only who entered the store but how employees carried out their duties and treated different customers. Ethan exited, letting the chime mark his departure. Outside, the fresh air of the morning felt different, lighter, freer. Yet he processed the patterns he had seen. The culture of exclusion was real, layered, and enforced subtly through authority and observation, rather than overt confrontation. He walked back through the streets, reflecting on the importance of patience, composure, and observation. Each visit to the store offered new insights into how assumptions shape interactions and influence the behavior of both staff and authority figures. Calm presence allowed him to learn without conflict, a tool more powerful than confrontation in revealing truth. Back at his apartment, he recorded every detail: gestures, tone of voice, posture, and whispered conversations. These observations were more than notes, they were evidence of social behavior under the influence of bias and power. He considered tomorrow's plan carefully, thinking about how he might engage subtly with employees to discern their individual attitudes. Independent of the owner's oversight, as evening settled, the city lights glimmered, and Ethan felt a quiet determination. The layers of human behavior he was uncovering revealed the interplay of authority, perception, and bias. Observing without disturbing allowed him to collect truths often hidden from immediate view. Lying in bed, he reflected on what he had learned and mentally prepared for the next phase. Patience, integrity, and careful observation remained his guiding principles. Each day brought him closer to understanding the unseen rules of the store and the social behaviors that governed it. Tomorrow promised new insights, subtle lessons, and the unfolding of truths that authority and prejudice could not entirely conceal. Ethan woke to the faint glow of dawn filtering through his curtains. Today felt different. There was a tension mixed with anticipation, a quiet excitement that stemmed from knowing this day could bring the culmination of his observations. For weeks he had quietly watched, recorded, and analyzed the behaviors inside the luxury store. Every glance, every gesture, every unspoken interaction had been noted carefully. Today, he intended to let events unfold in a way that would finally reveal the full truth of the environment he had been studying. He dressed with care, selecting neutral colors that exuded confidence but did not attract unnecessary attention. Shoes polished, shirt crisp, he checked himself in the mirror, ensuring that his appearance projected calm authority. It was not just about blending in. It was about embodying composure, quality that allowed him to observe the world with clarity and patience. Walking through the city streets, he noticed the familiar rhythms of morning life. Vendors setting up their stalls, delivery trucks moving with purpose, and people absorbed in their own worlds created a backdrop that was both ordinary and revealing. He observed silently, noting how subtle actions reflected character and intention. A man hurrying past without a glance, a woman offering her seat to an elderly stranger, a cyclist narrowly avoiding a pedestrian. All these small acts carried meaning. Lessons in human behavior that would later echo in the interactions within the store. As he approached the luxury store, he felt a steadying calm. The polished windows reflected the street in front of him, but also mirrored the expectations and biases he had witnessed in previous visits. The owner, sharp and vigilant, stood near the entrance, observing staff and customers alike. Employees moved with rehearsed precision, their actions carefully measured, as if every motion had been choreographed to maintain an appearance of perfection. Ethan took a deep breath, preparing to engage with this carefully constructed world, while remaining fully aware of the invisible dynamics at play. entering the store. He was greeted by the soft chime of the door and a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Staff glanced quickly, some offering small nods of acknowledgement, others averting their eyes. The owner's gaze immediately fell upon him, measuring, calculating. Ethan allowed himself to move with deliberate calm, walking slowly through the aisles, inspecting watches, handbags, and accessories with genuine interest. Each movement was purposeful, offering him time to observe the reactions around him. The owner approached, his voice polite but sharp. "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" "Just browsing," Ethan replied with a gentle smile. "I enjoy seeing the craftsmanship up close." His tone was measured neutral, yet inviting. He wanted to give the owner and staff the space to reveal their true responses without provoking defensiveness. The owner's eyes lingered, scanning Ethan's posture, clothing, and demeanor. Subtle signs of tension appeared, a slight narrowing of the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of the jaw. Ethan noted each detail without judgment. The room was a microcosm of human beings. Staff members moved with careful attention, some pretending to attend to other customers. The atmosphere was charged, yet restrained. It was as though the invisible boundaries of prejudice were etched into every movement, every word, every glance. Ethan understood the complexity of this dynamic. Influence was subtle, not always direct, and often more powerful when unspoken. He paused at a display of handbags, picking one up and turning it over in his hands. A young assistant approached hesitantly. "Would you like to see this in another color?" she asked, balancing initiative with caution. Aware of the owner's presence and expectations, "That would be wonderful. Thank you, Ethan," replied warmly. He observed her subtle discomfort, the tension in her shoulders, the quick flicker of concern in her eyes. This revealed not only the influence of authority but the human struggle between obedience and independent judgment. Each interaction became a window into the store's underlying culture. The owner moved closer, his posture firm. "I'm afraid customers cannot wander too freely," he said, courteous but commanding. "It is a private environment for serious shoppers." Ethan acknowledged this with a calm nod, adjusting his path without resistance. He observed the reactions of the staff, some hesitant, some relieved, some unsure. The unspoken hierarchy and the invisible boundaries of power were clear. Ethan continued to move through the store, silently noting whispers and glances. Employees spoke in hushed tones, one remarking, "He's not the usual type of customer." Another replied, "Just follow the rules." "The boss is very particular." These fragments confirmed Ethan's long-held observations. Bias and prejudice were not only present but reinforced by authority, shaping behavior even without overt instruction. As the morning progressed, Ethan approached the central area where the owner often lingered. He selected a watch, handling it with care and genuine appreciation for its craftsmanship. The owner's gaze followed, a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and the subtle tension of unspoken judgment. Ethan moved with the composed confidence of someone who understood both the rules of human behavior and the power of quiet integrity. Then a moment occurred that would mark the turning point. A well-dressed couple entered the store, their presence commanding attention. The owner greeted them warmly, but a subtle pattern emerged: his attentiveness, the tone of his voice, and the ease of interaction contrasted sharply with his treatment of Ethan. The disparity was clear, unspoken, yet undeniable. Ethan observed this carefully, recognizing it as an opportunity to see how bias affected even controlled environments. When confronted with different social expectations, the couple made selections, and Ethan watched the staff interact. The deference and courtesy given to them highlighted the contrast with previous interactions, making the owner's prejudice undeniable. Yet Ethan remained calm, patient, and composed. He was not here to confront, but to witness. Finally, as the couple prepared to leave, Ethan approached the counter with his chosen watch. He engaged politely with the assistant handling the sale. "I appreciate your help," he said warmly. "It has been a pleasure to learn about the details and care that goes into these pieces." The assistant smiled, a subtle sign of relief and validation. Ethan had modeled respect, patience, and integrity. demonstrating a quiet power that influenced even those constrained by authority. The owner, observing from nearby, seemed unsettled. Ethan's calm confidence and unassuming presence contrasted sharply with the rigid control he usually wielded. Subtle signs of discomfort appeared, tightening of the lips, a shift in stance, and a brief questioning glance. The lesson had been delivered not through confrontation, but through composed presence observation and quiet dignity. Ethan exited the store, the chime signaling his departure. Outside, the morning air felt different, lighter, freer. The city hummed around him, ordinary yet alive with potential for observation, reflection, and insight. He walked slowly, thinking about what had transpired. Bias, prejudice, and authority had been present. But the human spirit, composed, patient, observant, had demonstrated a subtle but undeniable power. He reflected on the lessons he had learned. Patience allows observation. Composure allows influence, and integrity delivers truth without conflict. Power is not always exerted through force or authority. It is often quiet, steady, and present in the way one carries oneself, interacts with others, and observes without judgment. Returning home, Ethan recorded his observations, noting every detail of gestures, tone, posture, and interaction. Each note reinforced the patterns of human behavior, the influence of authority, and the subtle power of composure. He planned to continue observing, but he also understood that the day had brought closure in its own way. The truth had revealed itself through the natural unfolding, low interactions. Without need for confrontation, as night fell, Ethan sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. He reflected on human behavior, authority, bias, and integrity. Today had confirmed what he had suspected. Influence comes quietly. Observation reveals truth, and patience delivers understanding. The owner's prejudice had been exposed, not through conflict, but through calm. Composed presence and careful attention to subtle dynamics, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his approach had revealed human truths in a way that confrontation never could. Life often presented challenges, but patience, integrity, and observation provided tools to navigate even the most rigid environments. Ethan drifted to sleep, calm, centered, and aware that the world contained both bias and opportunity.